Hey there, it's Lara here, Wednesday, July 15th. Welcome to your weekly astrology forecast. So, last week I mentioned that I may not be here or I may just pop in and do a short video. But as it turns out, that's not the case. I'm here, and but it may be the case for next week. So, just a heads up that next week I may see you for a shorter time. And if you don't happen to see me here at all, it's because the internet where I am is giving me grief at the lake. So you can check out Facebook though, and for updates on that. Okay, so the link to Facebook and Instagram is always below. So thanks for being here. As always, I really do appreciate it. You know, I really appreciate you hanging out with me every week, and your interactions and, your questions and your reading orders and all of that. So thank you for that. And I guess we'll start where we always start here, which is with the moon. And in fact, we're going to talk about the new moon that's coming up on the 20th, on July 20th. That'll be the focus for the video today. But we have some other things to talk about too. But the moon is currently in Taurus as I'm recording this. And, the moon in Taurus, I always love a moon in Taurus. The moon in Taurus, it's a good time for really just kind of taking a step back and enjoying some of the, more earthly pleasures of good food and time in nature, maybe getting your hands in the garden, and it's also a good time for focusing on stability and really getting your basic needs met, So as the moon travels on, she's going to move into Gemini tomorrow on Thursday, the 16th. And then on Saturday, she's going to move into Cancer, and we'll be there for a few days, and we'll have the new moon in Cancer, the new moon on Monday. I think that's a Duran Duran song, New Moon on Monday. At least it's a lyric. And then later on Monday, the moon will move into Leo. So that's where the moon's at. And as always, if you're interested and you haven't yet taken advantage of my free guide, my free guide to working with the moon, that's over on my website, and you can follow the link below to go grab that for yourself if you want. So before we get talking about that new moon in Cancer, though, a couple other things I want to address quickly. Of course, Mars is still in Aries, right? For the long haul. We've been talking about that for a while. There's a whole video on it on my channel. And I won't belabor the point here, but I just want to remind you of that because it's really, Mars in Aries is relevant for almost the rest of this year. And Mars is going to retrograde, right, in September. So Mars will officially retrograde September 9th. And be retrograde for a couple of months. I can't remember. It's November or something that it stations direct. But Mars is retrograding between 15 and 28 degrees of Aries. Excuse me. So up until then, Mars is clipping along in Aries, moving forward, and it's a really good opportunity to use that energy, right, for forward motion. Particularly as it relates to the Aries house in our chart, right? Wherever Aries sits in our chart and the themes around that. So it's good energy for pushing forward, for getting kind of fired up, for taking action on things, for really taking action that is in integrity as well. Fighting the good fight, doing things with courage, asserting yourself. It's a good time for clearing the air with somebody as long as you do it in a respectful way. It's a good time for physical assertion, right? What we have to be mindful of, as I said before with Mars and Aries, is particularly as it's in square with Mercury all month, right? Angry words, starting fights, arguing with people on the internet, being aggressive rather than assertive, directing or misdirecting your anger and rage. There is a place for that, right? There is a place for anger and rage. You are not a bad person because you feel angry sometimes. That's a normal human emotion. But it's all about how you direct that energy, how you deal with that energy. And just, another word on that. Sometimes what happens is, we are conditioned, particularly women, to not express our anger, right? We keep that bottled up, and then it can be like an implosion. We direct that towards ourselves, and it's like this internal combustion, and that's not healthy. That has to come out. Those feelings have to come out, and if we keep them bottled up and bottled up and bottled up, then sometimes what happens is they blow, right? The cork comes off, the lid comes off, and they blow. And then the aftermath of that is not so fun, and we don't feel so good about it. So if we use our anger and our rage with focus and intention and integrity, then that's really the best approach. So I just want to remind you of that. But on that note of Mars in Aries and going to retrograde there later this week, on July 25th, 26th, depending where you live, Mars is going to enter the area of Aries that it's going to retrograde back to, right? So it's going to reach 15 degrees of Aries, and it's going to hit those same degrees 3 times between 15 and 28, because it's moving forward, it hits those degrees, it stations and starts moving backward, and it travels back through those same degrees of Aries, and then it stations and starts moving forward for a third pass, right? So when this happens, it's really a signal to us to pay some serious attention to what's going on there, to the themes that are involved in that particular area of our chart at those specific degrees, right? So you need to take a look at your chart, if you know your chart, see where between 15 and 28 of Aries are for you. And that is this message from Mars. Mars really wants us to take care of business in that area of our chart. And Mars doesn't retrograde in Aries very often. So it's really important to take the opportunity to do that and to take care of business there, right? So I want to give you a heads up about that. Okay, so then what else? I think pretty much that's what I wanted to remind you of. And we're going to talk about the Cancer new moon that's happening on July 20th, on Monday, right? And it's happening specifically at 28 degrees of Cancer at 1:32 p.m. Eastern time. So you can adjust for your time zone. I'm going to show you the chart, and then we'll carry on the conversation here. So here's the chart for the new moon on Monday. So at that point, the sun and the moon will be together, because a new moon is always when the sun and the moon come together in the sky to birth something new, right? That energy of the divine masculine, the solar energy, and the divine feminine, right? The lunar energy coming together to birth something new. So there they are at 28 degrees of Cancer, right? And we also have Mercury in Cancer, who has now stationed direct, as of the 12th. And we have asteroid Vesta as well in Cancer, right? So, and then you see these hot red lines here, right? Well, guess where those are pointing towards, or where this challenge or this opposition, as what we call it, is happening. Yeah, Capricorn, right? Capricorn, all the energy in Capricorn. Specifically, this new moon is exactly exactly opposite Saturn in Capricorn. So that's a big factor in this new moon. We also have, of course, Pluto and Jupiter still there. They are gradually moving a little bit further apart. They just had their second exact conjunction. They'll have a third conjunction later on in the year. And then we also have Pallas Athena there. So that's really what I want you to notice in this chart. I spoke about Mars. There's Mars. I'll just point Mars out there in Aries, right? And also we have Eris, who is squaring this energy in Capricorn. So, and in Cancer. So that's really what I wanted to point out to you here on the chart. And let's break this down a bit and talk about it. So this is going to be first of all, it's the second new moon in Cancer that we've had back to back. The last new moon was an eclipse, and it was the last eclipse in Cancer, right? Because we are now officially done with eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn until the next time they happen, which won't be for another sort of 18 years. So, the thing, though, that you need to remember is just because the eclipses are officially over doesn't mean that energy is gone now, right? When an eclipse happens, the events sort of trickle out, the energy trickles out and continues to play out. The story continues to play out for at least several months afterwards. So 3 months, some people say 6 months, but nevertheless, it doesn't end just because the eclipses are done. But we are kind of wrapping up that story. And this Cancer new moon wants to remind us of that, I think. It's the first new moon that we've had in Cancer. That's not an eclipse since back in 2017. But the thing is, so because it's not an eclipse, it's less intense in some ways, right? However, it's directly opposing Saturn in Capricorn. So it's like, it's this reminder that, hey, keep paying attention. Not like we're going to have a choice because, this energy is not over for us yet in 2020, right? The story is still playing out for all of us collectively, obviously, and but also individually. And it's a reminder. Keep paying attention here, because if you haven't gotten a handle on whatever this is for you yet, right? This whole Capricorn story and the opposing Cancer energy, on that axis of our security, right? Emotional security is Cancer, material security is Capricorn. I also refer to it as the axis of parenting, right? That sort of divine masculine and feminine energy, the mother and the father. It can involve self-parenting, right? Or reparenting yourself as well, being who you needed when you were younger, sort of thing. But it's giving us this last sort of chance to take care of these things, to pay attention here, to work through this story, to get a handle on what this means for us, right? To learn these lessons, if you will, if we have been resisting it still. It's like, it's like a parent or a teacher who keeps giving you that one more chance, right? Okay, you got one more chance, but really this is your last chance. And I feel like this is what this new moon in Cancer is saying here, is that I really want you to succeed here. I really want you to get the message. And so I'll give you one more chance, right? That's kind of how I feel this is. So And the thing with this new moon opposing Saturn too is that, well, there's several things, but the moon is at home in the sign of Cancer, right? That's her domicile. So she is very true to nature. She's comfortable in Cancer. And when a planet is in their home sign, they operate, or they operate very true to their nature. So the moon is in Cancer, but Saturn is also in its home sign, directly across the sky, home sign of Capricorn. So Saturn is also being very true to his nature, right, in his home sign of Capricorn. And so what's the nature, right, of these two energies? Well, the moon is about, like on a personal level, our emotions. It's about our daily ups and downs and experiences, through life. It's about our sense of emotional security and what we need in order to feel safe and secure in the world, right? Particularly on an emotional level. The moon also is related to the divine feminine energy, the mother or the nurturing female figures, that sense of home and roots and ancestry, and then we've got Saturn across the sky in Capricorn, which is all about the structures and the rules and the responsibilities and the mastery of things and the boundaries and, the lessons hard learned and success hard won. And the authority, these kinds of things, right? And so there are some challenges at this new moon for us. We want to have a fresh start, right? A new moon is generally a fresh start, beginning of a new cycle. And because it's in the sign of Cancer, that involves themes like home and, domestic things, right? Home, family, tribe, the people that we think of as family, and our sense of emotional safety and security, our roots, sometimes even, things like our literal place of living, right? But so we want to have this fresh start here. But then Saturn across the sky in opposition is challenging us and saying, wait, not so fast, but there's these rules and there's these boundaries and there's these lessons that still need to be learned and these restrictions and, all of this. And so that can be frustrating, right? So, for example, it's summertime where I am. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere, it's summertime. And so, we're in this time of year when we're usually getting together with friends and family and, having a good old time, but we still have some restrictions, right? Because of the pandemic. And so we may have these boundaries, like we want to connect with people, but we can't do it in a way that we normally would. And so that can be frustrating. So that's sort of one example. And before the moon and the sun oppose Saturn at this new moon, they are going to also oppose the other planets that are in Capricorn, right? So Pallas, asteroid Pallas, Jupiter, and Pluto. So it's a bit of an intense week leading up to the new moon in that way. It's like we are being faced, directly faced by, because it's an opposition, all of this huge, powerful energy, right? All of those planets in Capricorn. And we know what this story is about in many ways already. And, we've talked about it so much over the last couple of years. But So at this new moon, we're kind of we're still being faced with this. And it's kind of like this, yep, that's still there. Yep, we're still going through this. And so we have the option to either be completely overwhelmed and stopped in our tracks and sort of just, either say, forget about it, I'm not dealing with this, or be paralyzed into sort of non-action, or resist the truth and the reality of the situation. There's a whole lot of people out there that are really still trying to do that right now. Or we can focus on what we can control, right? And usually that involves things that are close to home, Cancer. So that's really, I think, where our focus should be, right? Is what can we do despite it all, despite the whole shit show going on? What can we do to nurture ourselves and those we love, those folks that are in our tribe? What can we do to nurture and feel a sense of connection and emotional safety and security? So I think that's really the focus of this new moon. I also want to say, before I go through the signs and speak to where this new moon is happening for each of us, we're really seeing the chickens come home to roost this year, right? And I don't know if you're paying attention, but it's kind of like, how I said earlier on, I feel almost like we're in this kind of like, okay, last chance. You've had all these chances, last chance now, to do the right thing, in a sense, in many ways. And there are people who I think thought they were maybe going to get away with it, or those rules don't apply to them. And now we're seeing, the chickens come home to roost. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing this happen even in the quote unquote spiritual community, right? I'm seeing a real interesting, because we have so much what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, like divisiveness and so much, the word won't come to mind right now, but, opposition and that kind of thing going on between certain factions and people with certain, beliefs and this sort of thing. We're seeing that in the spiritual community as well, where we've got sort of people and I have to say, I've followed Timothy Halloran for a long time, since he started his YouTube channel. And I've always had deep respect for him because he is a truth teller, right? And that really resonates with me. And so he's been talking a lot about this, and I really respect him for that. And I've been talking with some other friends about this, and I've been noticing this even in local circles, but also on a grander scale, where there is a sort of a certain group that is very much about, if we just don't look at that, and if we just don't pay attention to those things, then we are, vibrating at a higher level than everybody, and we're creating the new world. And, there's a lot of pieces here, and then there's another group that, if I'm going to be truthful and honest with you, that I align myself with more, that I feel I resonate with more. And that is the group who is, sort of, yes, we are spiritual beings, but we are definitely having a human experience, and you cannot separate those two things, right? It's not okay to use, in my opinion, it's not okay to use spirituality as an excuse for inaction, or to use spirituality as an excuse for bad behavior. You know, that is toxic. It's toxic spirituality, in my opinion, right? And trying to tell people that if they would just focus on the positive and love and light and raise your vibration and all of this stuff. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that. Please know that. And I've been down that road, been there, done that, right? And ended up where I am now, with my current sort of stance on it. But that's damaging to people as well, because they feel like they should be able to control what's going on. And it's like, it's guilting and blaming people for the situation. And that's not healthy. And that re-traumatizes and creates further issues, in my opinion. So, that's my 2 cents on that. But I think it's interesting because we're seeing this play out, right, in so many ways, including in the sort of spiritual community. So yeah, I think that's all I'll say on that note for now. But I may talk further about that at some point. Let's have a run through all 12 signs and talk about where this new moon is happening for each of us, right? Based on, first and foremost, your rising sign, right? In these general forecasts, that's what we use, and we use whole sign houses. So if you know your chart and your chart is done in a different house system, have a look specifically at that, and have a look at where 28 degrees, right, of Cancer falls for you, and Capricorn as well. They'll be right across the sky from each other. And within, sort of 5 degrees on either side of that, right? So particularly if you have planets points around the 28 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, then this will be felt, strongly by you, this new moon. So as I always do, I will start with first house, right? I always start with the event that's happening in the first house, whatever sign it is that's happening in the first house. That's how I do this for equality. So we don't always go Aries to Pisces. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And keeping in mind what I've said here in the introduction about the focus being on what we can control, particularly around those Cancerian themes, right? Of emotional security, tribe, home, family, roots, place of living, homeland, these sorts of things. And keeping in mind the lessons that Saturn is wanting to impart to us, and wants us to learn, and wants us to not lose sight of, and sort of work within these confines, right? It's about balancing, and opposition is always about balancing those energies. So that's what we're focusing on here in terms of the new moon. So Cancer first today, because the new moon is happening in your first house, right? So this new moon is really focusing on the energy of Cancer. And for you, that's all about the self. The first house is the self, the physical, body and vitality, and the notion of who am I, right? I, me, mine, my place in the world, my identity is the first house. How I project myself out into the world, how, and how you are perceived, Cancer. So a new moon in your sign here is a fresh start, right? It's the chance to begin something new surrounding those themes. But then you've got Capricorn sitting opposite the sky in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, of close personal relationships, contracts, and agreements. And so, that energy is kind of, there's some potentially kind of butting heads there, a need for balancing those two realms, right? Of self and other at the time of this new moon. So that's for you, Cancer. And next we've got Gemini, where the new moon in Cancer is happening in your 2nd house. So for you, Gemini, this is about this new beginning in the area of life that has to do with your personal resources. So, kind of how you get your basic needs met using your skills and talents, how you make your money. It's about also, when I think of personal resources, I don't just think of our finances and our material possessions, but I also think about our time and our energy, right? Those are our resources as well. And then the 2nd house also speaks to what we value, what we put value on, what we consider valuable and worthy, including our own sense of self-worth. And it's also about things that we kind of even put into our body, like our food, that sort of thing, is 2nd house as well. So Gemini, for you, this is where the new beginning is, but there's a challenge from the 8th house across the sky, which is where all the Capricorn energy is and where Saturn's opposing, right? And it's this, the 8th house is this, it speaks to our entanglement with other people, right? And their resources. So it's the house of intimacy, right? Our intimate connections, how we merge with others in some way. And because of that, it's about things like, other people's resources in terms of their time, money, energy, taxes and insurance and wills and bursaries and scholarships and, debt and all of these things. And also how we merge on a sort of deep psychological level. It's about the sort of hidden occult things, right? Occult just means hidden knowledge, deep psychological sort of wounding and healing. It's a complicated house, the 8th house. But this is where the challenge is coming from. Like, to really boil it down and put it simply, your resources, 2nd house, where the new moon is, versus other people's resources, right? Which is the 8th house. So that's what's going on for you, Gemini. And then next we have Taurus, where the new moon is happening in your 3rd house. And that speaks to things like, your immediate environment and the people in it. So that tends to be cousins, siblings, neighbors, community members, teammates, workmates, this sort of thing, the people we interact with on the day-to-day and in more sort of close proximity, but also just with messages exchanged, right? The 3rd house is the house of communications. So it's about how we communicate and the back and forth that goes on there. It is about the exchange of goods and services as well. So commerce, right, is 3rd house. Sort of publicity and like marketing. I mean, marketing more so than publicity. That's more 9th house. But and it's about learning sort of on a basic level. So early learning, right? So and it's about our perceptions of things as well. That's the 3rd house. And that's where the new moon is happening. But there's this challenge happening from the 9th house of your worldview and belief system and philosophy and, teaching and learning at a higher level. Maybe people you consider gurus, or yourself in that position. It's about what we learn from people who are different from us. Foreign people and places. It can be about long distance travel as well. And so there's a challenge coming. There are hard lessons to be learned because Saturn is there opposing this new moon, right? So there we have the new moon for you, Taurus. And next we've got Aries. Aries, the new moon's happening in your 4th house, which is the home house of Cancer. And so it's very much about these issues of home, family, roots, ancestry, our sense of emotional safety and security in the world, the matriarchal lineage, the nurturing female figures, this kind of thing. So this is where there's an opportunity for a fresh start, but there is a challenge happening from the 10th house, which is where the Capricorn energy is for you, including Saturn opposing this new moon. And that has to do with your public life, right? Whereas the 4th house is the private life, domestic affairs. The 10th house is public life and legacy and your worldly ambitions and your public reputation and persona and the relationship you have with authority. So that's where the challenge is coming from for you, Aries, and it's a matter of trying to balance these things. Okay, next we have Pisces. Pisces, the new moon is happening in your 5th house. The 5th house, so this fresh start, there's this kind of opportunity here, and it has to do with things like your ability to shine or, your creative self-expression. It's about all things you create, including children, and that can be your own children, right? Or it can be children you work with or are involved with in some way. It has to do, the 5th house is very much about this sense of sort of childlike wonder and what brings us pleasure and what sparks joy for us. And so there's an opportunity for newness here, but there's a challenge coming from the 11th house across the sky, which is about the group, the collective. It's about, organizations, clubs, associations, friendship groups, the people that can help you get where you're going, the people that are walking the same path as you. It's very much about, your hopes and dreams for the future and any gains that you can make. So those two things are in opposition, right? And so there is a challenge there for you to balance those things. So next we have Aquarius. Aquarius, the new moon's happening in your 6th house of the daily routines, right? So checking off the ticky boxes, the daily grind. And this can also involve health and wellness. Anything surrounding health and wellness. It involves how you are in service, right? And it's the house of servitude. So think about it in the sense that it's about unequal relationships as well. And it also involves pets, Aquarius. So for you, this is where the new moon's happening, but the challenge is coming from the 12th house across the sky, which is where Capricorn sits and where Saturn will be opposing this new moon. And so the challenge is coming from a very hidden sort of area of the chart. And it can be about hidden enemies is one theme here, but also very much about what goes on behind closed doors for you, right? How you spend time in solitude, how you potentially sabotage yourself through unhealthy habits and potentially addictions and these kinds of things, right? It's also very much about connection to spirit and your spiritual sort of mental health, whereas the 6th house has a lot more to do with the physical health. And this can be about your dream life and the subconscious and that sort of thing, right? So this is where this opposition is happening for you at the time of this new moon, Aquarius. Next, we've got Capricorn. So Capricorn, the new moon is happening in your, opposite your 1st house in your 7th house. So the new moon in Cancer is 7th house for you. And this is the house of one-to-one close personal relationships and the house of contracts and agreements. And so this is where something new, a new seed wants to be planted, but there's a challenge from the house of self, of your identity, of who you are, of your own physical vitality and body, and how you project yourself out into the world and how you are perceived, right? So this is all about self and other. And so this is where this balance is being asked of you. The new moon in the house of, your one-to-one relationships, and then Saturn sitting in the house of self, right? Challenging. So that's for you. And next we have Sagittarius. The new moon's happening in your 8th house, which is this house of intimacy, our intimate connections, and how we are. I really like this word entangled lately to describe the 8th house, right? And how we are connected to other people through their resources, time, money, energy, other people and organizations and institutions even. It's about our deep psychological healing and wounding as well. And it's also the house of transformation, right? So the cycle of death and rebirth. And then the challenge is coming from the 2nd house of your own personal resources, your own time, money, energy, the skills and talents you use to get your basic needs met, what you place value and worth on, including your sense of self-worth. So these two things are kind of at odds, right? Over this new moon. And it's up to you to kind of work with and balance those energies, right? To enable this fresh start. Next, we have Scorpio. Scorpio, the new moon for you is in the 9th house of foreign people and places, of your philosophy, your worldview, your belief system, teaching, learning, higher-minded ideas kind of thing, ideologies, potentially foreign travel. So this is where the fresh start is on offer, but then there's a challenge from the 3rd house, right, of where Capricorn sits and where Saturn will be opposing, of communications, right? And messages exchanged back and forth, marketing, commerce, your immediate environment and the people in it. So this is where the challenge is being presented to you. So working to balance those two areas is what's in store for you, Scorpio. Next, we've got Libra, where we've got the new moon happening in your 10th house of your public life, your public reputation and persona, the legacy you wish to leave, your relationship to authority, your career and ambitions in that regard. And then there's a challenge coming from the 4th house, right? Saturn in the 4th house, Capricorn, of emotional security, whereas 10th house is material security, of home, family, place of living, female figures, this sort of thing, right? This is where the challenge is. And so there is this challenge to balance these two things at the time of this new moon, Libra. Next, we have Virgo. Virgo, the new moon is happening for you in your 11th house of networks and friendship groups, clubs, organizations, the house of the collective and the house of people that are walking the same path as you that can help you reach your goals, right? And so it's very much about your hopes and dreams for the future and how you can get there. And so there's a challenge, though, Virgo, happening from the 5th house across the sky, which is where Saturn and Capricorn are. And that challenge is coming from these themes around children, joy, pleasure, how you have fun, creativity, your creative self-expression, these sorts of things, right? So that's yours to work on over the course of this full moon, right? The opportunity is in the 11th house. The challenge is in the 5th. And last but not least, in this case, we've got Leo. So Leo, for you, the new moon, this new opportunity is presenting itself in your 12th house of the unseen, of, how you potentially may sabotage yourself, of what goes on behind closed doors, of the hidden realms, of your connection to spirituality, of your spiritual and mental health, of things involving places that are behind, locked away from the world, like hospitals and hospices and ashrams and spiritual retreat centers, prisons, rehab facilities, these kinds of things, right? And your sort of dream life and your psychological, spiritual health. So, and then the challenge is happening from your 6th house of your daily grind, of daily routines, of your health and wellness, and routines around that, of how you are in service, and of this, you know, kind of idea of unequal relationships. Also pets, it falls into this category of 6th house. And so that is the house that is challenging, right? The opportunity, the new opportunity in the 12th. And it's a matter of balancing those two things. And that will help you kind of deal with this energy in the best way possible. So that's for you, Leo. And that's all 12 signs. So I hope that you got something out of this, as I always do. And you, like I said, I may or may not see you here next week. I'm going to try my best, but it probably won't be a full-on video because of the internet issue where I'll be. So take good care. Connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. In the meantime, those links are below. Leave me a comment. Let me know what's transpiring for you, and if you have any thoughts on any of this, okay, or any questions. And you can always reach me over at my website too, if you're interested in a reading. Okay, bye for now. See you later.